Happy Friday morning. Welcome inside the Millvale Studios for this edition of Gajtka Game on the River's Edge. I'm your host, Matt Gajtka, and your Pittsburgh Penguins are one win away from repeating as Stanley Cup champions. That'll be the crux of today's show, as you might imagine. A bit of a shorter edition here. Just rolling out of bed after another late night covering the Final Four. DKPittsburghSports.com. Thank you for joining us here on the live stream on riversedgepgh.com, as well as Facebook Live. And we provide the multimedia presentation. No matter how you want to catch it, you can find a way to follow not just this show, but all the rest of our programming here at the River's Edge. And my show will be broadcast later in the mornings now. Happy to talk about that, or happy to have that. Everyone likes to sleep in a little bit more in the summertime, don't they? So we're going to match up with that. Another guy who likes to do that is my guest for today's show, Saunders. He'll be aboard in just a few minutes as we'll go over Game 5. The Penguins crushed the Predators 6-0. And as I mentioned, now with a chance to hoist the cup, whether it be Game 6 in Nashville on Sunday or next Wednesday. That feels like a long time in the future, but with these two-day breaks, it will be next Wednesday if a Game 7 is necessary at PPG Paints Arena. So Alan will be with me in just a moment, and we'll also talk some converging hockey news between the Penguins and their legendary owner, and Robert Morris. That'll also be on the docket today as some news came out this week. And, of course, Alan covers all things below the Penguins, if you will, all hockey news that's not the Penguins in Pittsburgh with his website, Pittsburgh Hockey Digest, berghockey.com. So he'll be calling in just a moment. But I wanted to take this opening segment to simply marvel over this Penguins team. They've had to warm to the task in some of these different series this playoffs, and it feels like they've had an adjustment period in each round. And even in the first round, when they beat the Blue Jackets rather routinely by the final score, that is, in the first two games of the opening round, you felt like they were trying to find their bearings and warm to it, to figure out ways to attack the team that they were facing. In that case, it was Columbus. In the second round, Washington. I think in that round they played their best hockey early on, or at least their best counterattacking hockey, because they knew they weren't going to control play against Washington. And then the virtuoso performance in Game 7 that got them through. So that's a little bit of an exception to that rule. But you look at the last two series in particular, the East Final against Ottawa, the Senators tried to slow it down. They didn't want to let the Penguins come into their zone with odd man rushes, with rush chances, and they did a great job. I think the Penguins had maybe just one or two odd man looks in that entire series because Ottawa just backed into their own end and they played their 1-3-1 neutral zone trap, and they rode or died with that tactic. And eventually it ended up with them on the short end, but it took all the way until Game 7 and the second overtime of Game 7, in fact, before Chris Kunitz ended it. But the Penguins were playing better in Games 4, 5, 6, and 7 in that series, and I think we're at the start of a similar trend here in the Stanley Cup Final against Nashville. The Predators combined the aggressiveness of the Blue Jackets. Well, they're still combining it. I don't want to put them in past tense just yet. They're not dead yet. But they have combined the aggressiveness of the Blue Jackets and some of the poise of the Capitals without the finishing ability of Washington necessarily up front. But they've given the Penguins fits, and this defense core for Pittsburgh has been under pressure, and especially down in Nashville. The Predators, I think, took advantage of maybe some questionable ice conditions at Bridgestone Arena. They're a fast team too, but when the puck isn't moving as quick as it was last night at PPG Paints Arena, and it was noticeable if you've covered both sides of this series in Nashville and in Pittsburgh, the ice is just much better up here, and that benefits the high-end skill of the Penguins, whether we're talking even strength or on the power play, which the Penguins converted on very early on, 91 seconds in fact, to get a leg up on Nashville in that pivotal game number 5. But the Penguins had trouble with whatever it might be, the sticky ice in Nashville, the overwhelming home crowd down there at Bridgestone Arena. That was something to experience firsthand. Almost literally a seventh man, as they call themselves down there at times. And I think Nashville fed off that. If not, I'm not going to go as far as saying the Penguins were adversely affected by it. But clearly the Predators are a more confident team at home, I think, and they haven't been able to get to the Penguins' defense core and interfere with the breakout as much on Pittsburgh ice in this series for one reason or another. And even if you go back to games 1 and 2, the Penguins weren't very good, but I don't think they were necessarily pinned in their own zone as they were in games 3 and 4 in Nashville. So I don't know what it is. The home ice has been a boon for both teams in this series, which is funny because typically in the NHL, home ice isn't much of an advantage at all. In fact, out of the 5 major sports, you throw in soccer into the mix with football, with basketball, with baseball. Hockey has traditionally the lowest home winning percentage. It's around 53% on last check. And this was all explored in a great book called Scorecasting by Sports Illustrated's L. John Wertheim. He was one of the co-authors there. I suggest you take a look at that if you're into hardcore sports analysis, which I am, obviously. Heck, I write a weekly stats column on our website, so you know which way I tend to lean when it comes to that. But usually, home ice isn't that big of a deal in hockey, but this series has been different in that way. And yeah, there can be anomalies. And I don't know, like I said, whether it's ice, whether it's getting matchups, no matter what it may be, the Penguins were a different team in Game 5. I tend to think they built off of Game 4, and that seemed to be the consensus in the dressing room at the podium last night at PPG Paints. They were very encouraged, the Penguins were, by their Game 4 despite the 4-1 loss. They thought they had the edge in scoring chances. NaturalStatTrick.com, one of the publicly available websites for advanced hockey stats, agreed with them. They had them up 17-11 in high-danger chances. Last night in Game 5, it was 11-5. And when you give the Penguins that many great looks at the net, if it's in double digits, I think they're going to put some goals in on you. And I don't really pin anything on Pekka Rinne. I don't think he was that good of a goalie to begin with. Yes, he's had a spectacular playoff, or did, through the first 3 rounds, most notably early, and trailing off as the playoffs go along. But he's always been an inconsistent guy. I've never been terribly impressed with his technique or his results against the Penguins. That's a small sample size, but the Penguins are usually going to get off higher quality shots than most opponents. And I don't see Rinne as a guy who can necessarily stand up to that type of pressure over a 7-game series and come out smelling like a rose on the back end of it. And so far in Pittsburgh, he has a save percentage under 800. Yes, in Nashville, he was pretty good. I thought he was more desperate than composed, and perhaps that's where he's more comfortable, is lunging around the crease and trying to make the above average save after he gets a little bit out of position. I think that's more his game. It's almost like early career Marc-Andre Fleury you see from Pekka Rinne, with a little bit more height, some more size. But there are some characteristics there that the two will share. And meanwhile, with Matt Murray and net at the other end, you're going to get a quiet goaltender in more ways than one, not just soft-spoken after the game, but in net doesn't move a ton, makes the saves he's supposed to for the most part, and I think that will be enough for the Penguins to win the Cup against the Predators if they continue to play this way. They gave up some breakaways, some odd-man chances in Nashville, really nothing of the sort in Pittsburgh in Game 5, and if we go by the premise that the Penguins are building toward this crescendo, that they have figured something out with Nashville, which I think they have, whether they'll tell us or not, that's another case. Usually you have to wait until after the series to get the tactical information and the details. But this has a feel similar to last round when the Penguins played better as they got their bearings against a particular opponent. For Ottawa, it was the passive approach. For the Predators, it's been an aggressive attack and maybe some of their own failings too, and some of their own fatigue creeping in. And there's another difference that I want to get to in this series before we take our first break. there have been breaks in this series. There have been 3 two-day breaks now as we head into Game 6. The break between Games 2 and 3, between 4 and 5, and now it'll be 5 and 6. We're in the midst of that third two-day break. I think that benefits the Penguins more than it does the Predators. The Penguins are coming off back-to-back 7-game series. They're also in the midst of playing 200-plus games over 2 seasons. The more rest you can get, the better quality hockey it's going to be. And with the skill advantage the Penguins have over the Predators, I think that benefits them more than it does Nashville. And I think Nashville would rather just play out the string every other day like we saw in the conference finals. But, in the case of the Stanley Cup finals, for whatever reason, the NHL has built in these extra travel days. And by the way, thank you as someone who's driving back and forth to Nashville. It helps us media types get our rest too and feel at our best. So, hey, that's much appreciated from my end. But from the players' perspective, I believe you saw that play out. The Penguins were terrific right from the start, and I think getting some extra rest, some downtime, plays a large role in that. So mix all that together, what I was just talking about for the past 10 minutes, and I think this team is poised to deliver yet another series closing performance that we'll marvel at afterward. And it's going to be down in Nashville. I mentioned the ice will be different. The atmosphere will be different, but I think we're seeing a different Penguins team over the past 2 games. This is Gajtka Game on the River's Edge. When we come back, Alan Saunders will join me. He'll give his input into the Stanley Cup final through 5 games. And as I mentioned, a little bit of a cross-pollination between the Penguins and the Robert Morris Colonials. College and pro hockey comes together in Pittsburgh yet again as the field for the Three Rivers Classic College Hockey Showcase was announced. Well, it came out. I don't know if it was technically announced, but we'll get you more of those details on the backside of this break. This is the River's Edge.
Hey, listen up for some sweet pizza discounts. The River's Edge is partnering with Frank's Pizza and Chicken to offer you 10% off your ZA. That's short for pizza.
Seriously? ZA?
What?
Anyway, mention you heard this ad and Frank's will give you 10% off your order of $15 or more.
Oh my god, have you tried their famous buffalo chicken pizza?
Oh, don't even get me started. Can you name all 4 Frank's locations?
Millville, obviously. Troy Hill, Shaler, and North Hills.
Gold star. Anyway, support the River's Edge Radio Network by ordering from Frank's Pizza and Chicken the next time you get hungry for some ZA. And don't forget to mention you heard this ad so you get your 10% off. Go to frankspizzachicken.com for more info.
Offer good for a limited time. Order must be $15 or more before taxes. Cannot be combined with other discounts or offers. Other legal jargon and whatnot.
Back inside the Millvale studios, between games 5 and 6 of the Stanley Cup final, and it's an all-hockey edition of Gajtka Game. And we are live on riversedgepgh.com, also Facebooking live, if you will. You can find us over there at our Facebook page, of course, the River's Edge. And my guest at this time is a frequent guest on the show. We try to have him on about once a month, and it is that time again here in the first part of June. It was at this point last year, Alan, that we were talking about an overwhelming Penguins team and just a matter of time maybe before they knocked out the Sharks. This series has been different against Nashville. They've had to figure some things out, and after games 4 and 5, I think we're seeing a different Penguins team, as I argued in my opening segment. So what do you see so far in this series? Do you see the Penguins as having turned a corner against Nashville?
I don't know if they've turned a corner. I just think that the team is defensively weaker than it was a year ago. And it's pretty obvious, I think, to just about anybody watching it. And it's kind of made for an interesting matchup with Nashville, because I don't think Nashville's forward group is particularly dynamic for a team that's made it this far into the playoffs. Right? I mean, they have some nice players. Forsberg is very talented, and they have a lot of energy and speed, but they don't really have the kind of players that really go out and embarrass a defensive core for the most part. So I've been pretty interested that Nashville was able to find ways to just overwhelm the Penguins defense with waves of pressure.
Yep.
Even though they don't really have high-end skill. And to me, that's more of it almost became like more of a mental thing than a physical thing, right? Like, because, if you turn the puck over in the corner to guys that don't have a ton of skill, I mean, that's not great. But that's not usually going to end up in the back of your net. But if you panic because of pressure and then you just throw the puck places, that's how it ends up in the back of your net. So I think maybe once the Penguins defense realized that, yeah, maybe they're under a lot of pressure. Nashville's a very aggressive forechecking team, but there's not a lot of teeth behind that attack. That I do think that maybe once that sort of mental hurdle was cleared, the Penguins defense will be able to. I don't know if they're going to play better. I don't know if they're going to get out of their zone faster, but I think they're going to be able to do a better job of minimizing the really bad mistakes that end up in the back of the net, and that's really what Nashville capitalized on in their victories.
I think that second goal the Penguins scored last night was a fairly good example of the D just doing what they have done when they have been successful in the playoffs without Chris Letang. Just making the simple play. Trevor Daley sees Matt Irwin stepping up. He just hammers it off the glass, and he knows he has his forward streaking down ice. It bounces to Kunitz. Rust beats Irwin up the ice, and it's 2-0, just like that. We haven't seen a lot of that in this series. That reminded me a lot of the Columbus series and Washington at times, too. But especially Columbus. And I think there are some parallels to be drawn between Nashville and Columbus. Columbus doesn't have a terrible amount of finishing talent in its forward group, but they are tenacious, and they do come at you in waves like the Predators do too. I think Nashville's defense core, I know Nashville's defense core is better than what the Jackets threw out there, although the Jackets have guys like Seth Jones and Zach Werenski who can certainly skate and gap up and do all those things you're looking for. But the stylistic aspect of it, I believe it has been parallel with that first round. Do you see a similar thing?
Yeah, I think they're pretty similar teams. I think they're constructed from a similar place in that they built from the back end out with speed, but the forwards, there's some skill scattered here and there, but for the most part, it's a lot of guys that are just going to come and work hard and put pressure on another defense, but there's not a ton of depth to the skill. Um, and really, I think both teams are built on maybe primarily, maybe even before the defense, really solid goaltending, and that's always been something that's interested me. And that a lot of the times you don't see the teams with the best goaltenders don't often win. There's not like a really strong correlation there.
Mm-hmm.
We saw it with Martin Brodeur, but what the New Jersey Devils were doing went way beyond,
Yeah.
way beyond the goalie.
It wasn't just
And
him.
so, yeah, and so I think even in an NHL environment that I still believe depresses scoring quite a bit by the fact that penalties are not called by the book, and and other things like that. The epidemic of shot blocking, things of that nature. It still seems to be, to me anyway, that really good offense still finds a way to beat really good goaltending
Hmm.
in the postseason. And you look at some of these teams that I think are built with that top flight goalie as sort of the cornerstone of their existence. And I don't think that they typically get it done in the end. And I think that's an interesting. I typically don't think there's a lot of different ways to build a successful hockey team. I'm not sure relying on goalie defense first in 2017 is necessarily going to be the way that is going to get it done for most teams.
And in the case of Nashville, I've never been a huge Pecorine fan anyway. He goes up and down. He has a good season. He has a bad season. This was a good season, no doubt, for him, but I never saw him as a guy that you could just lean on, like we've seen Henrik Lundqvist do in the playoffs past with the Rangers a few times, where you felt like he was actually winning games for them. I didn't see that with Nashville, and all due respect to Rene for hanging around the NHL this long and for rebounding from some of those bad seasons that I mentioned too. But this is about what I figured we'd see. If the Penguins got some high-quality looks, they were going to bury him against him, so I'm not really surprised at all. If anything, I was surprised by his play in Games 3 and 4 down in Nashville, where he did steal a couple away from the Penguins.
Yeah, and I think he's a very talented goalie. I think you kind of had to figure, at least I did, coming into a series against him. There's probably going to be one game right? Where
Hmm.
Rene just plays above his typical level and steals a game. I think he kind of had to you know build that in coming into any sort of prediction for the series is that, well, Rene is probably going to steal one at least for Nashville, even if the Penguins outplay them throughout. And I think pretty clearly the Penguins did not outplay Nashville for the first 3 games of the series. So, yeah, I mean, I think I think he's a good goalie. I don't know if he's a great goalie. I don't know if he's one of the best goalies in the league. He's certainly not. I don't think, and I think it's been fairly well proven that he's not the kind of guy that's just going to just get you far into the playoffs all on his own. But like I was saying, I'm not sure that guy really exists. I mean, you brought up Henrik Lundqvist. That's probably the best goaltender in the NHL over the
Hmm.
last decade. And yeah, I mean, hasn't even really gotten all that close to winning the Stanley Cup very often. So yeah, I think there's something to be said for offense winning in the end when it comes. I mean, obviously with a lot of other factors too. But I do think that the skill of the Penguins is really what's come through for them in these series, especially against these teams like Columbus and Ottawa and Nashville that either play with that neutral zone system like Ottawa did, or Columbus and Nashville that are kind of built from the net and the back out. It just seems like they're for whatever reason, there's not enough adjustments to make to take away the Penguins' talent for long enough to beat them in a 7-game series.
We're talking to Alan Saunders, the owner and proprietor of Pittsburgh Hockey Digest, and we'll get to something related to his website in just a bit. One last question about the Penguins, though. Alan, whether they pull this off or not, they're one win away from being the first team to repeat in nearly 2 decades in the NHL, the first team in the salary cap era to do it if they can get one of the next two. What's impressed you the most about this team? What will you remember about this repeat effort, which, as I mentioned, is basically unprecedented in modern hockey?
Yeah, I think that the thing that really sticks out to me is that when the Penguins won in 2009 and when they got close in 2008, they played with, we called it the 3 center model.
Mm-hmm.
But what it really was, I mean, sure, the centers were the 3 best players on the offensive players. Well, maybe not the 3 best, but 3 of the best offensive players on that team. But really, what it was to me was that was a 3 scoring line model.
Yep.
Um, and with Crosby and Malkin and Phil Kessel, these Penguins over the last 2 seasons have been able to just hammer teams in the offensive zone at any point. You see these shifts where the entire shift is in the offensive zone, and then part of the next shift is in the offensive zone. And you look up, and sometimes that's the third line doing it to a team. That's just a demoralization factor. It's a wear you down over the course of a game in a series factor, and there's no way to combat that. You can't game plan for another team's third line. You only have 3 defensive pairs. Like there's just not enough mental energy, time, and space to try to find a way to take away third line wingers. And yet Phil Kessel is certainly talented enough to beat any team on any given night. And I think the depth of the Penguins offense and the way that they were willing to last season move Kessel to that third line, put young guys like Sheary, Rust, and now Gensel in those in important places in the lineup because they have Crosby, Malkin, Kessel. Hey, it's better to have 3 lines with maybe some guys that aren't as talented as the other guys than to stack your top 2 and then just punt the other 40% of the time. You have a different forward unit on the ice. To me, I think that's the big deal, and I think that plays through with some of the other more dominant teams we've seen in this era. You look at Chicago, you look at the Los Angeles Kings. Those were teams that had solid depth of scoring. The Kings had the third and fourth line going when they won. Chicago obviously has probably just about as much skill as anybody else in the league besides the Penguins. So to me, I think that's it. It can't be offense is what's won the Penguins their Stanley Cups, but it's also been depth of offense and the willingness to go 3 lines deep with super talented players.
Yeah, for me, it ties into what you're talking about. When you spend that much time in the offensive zone, you're not exposing your defense core that much, and they're able to play to their strengths. A guy like Trevor Daley is never going to defend very well, but when he's on the attack, when he's on his front foot, he'll be dangerous. He'll push the opposition back, and he'll help you maintain possession in the offensive zone and maybe get you a goal or an assist or two as well. This playoff run for me has been more about how they've tactically minimized the lackluster guys on defense. Let's be quite honest with you, with the listeners here. I don't think there has been a more a mediocre group on paper as far as the blue line goes to win a Stanley Cup than this one if they get it done. And really last year, Chris Letang carried all the load or a lot of it, and Ben Lovejoy was kind of your shutdown guy too. They don't have either of those guys these playoffs, and they've still, for the most part, there have been a lot of moments of weakness for sure. It's been a tougher road to win this year, and part of that is HBK not being a thing this year too. So they've been more reliant on Crosby and Malkin. They've been more reliant on guys making just good decisions and not necessarily transcendent plays from the back end because there was no number 58. So if they can get it done, certainly there are several characteristics we can look at, and I suppose we can wait until we see if they do or they don't next week to really dig into all that. Well, I teased it, Alan. Robert Morris and the Penguins have a partnership to put on the Three Rivers Classic every December, and they didn't announce this news officially, but you covered it on your website, berghockey.com. Arizona State will be part of the 3-team guest field for the Classic next year, and people don't even know Arizona State has a Division I hockey team. Well, they do. It was their first season this past year, but they will have a freshman on their roster with a familiar last name. His name is Austin Lemieux, Mario's son, 21 years old. He'll be on Arizona State. Not sure if he's going to play in the Classic. He was in Tier 3 junior hockey this past year. But that's a fun little story, and I'm sure that'll add some buzz to the Classic, which will also include Providence and Lake Superior State next Christmas season.
Yeah, I mean, it should be, it's an easy connection to make, right? I mean,
no doubt.
I think it'll be a good thing for, as far as the marketability of the tournament. Arizona State is it's interesting because Pittsburgh's not really a traditional college hockey market. Not yet, it's getting there, but
give them some time. Yeah.
Yeah, but in some ways, there are some very, very well-known college hockey programs that probably don't move the needle at all when it comes to name recognition in Pittsburgh, right? I mean, I just don't think that maybe like I had to explain to people last year how good Quinnipiac is.
Right, and they played in the Frozen Four here 4 years ago. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So maybe a school like Arizona State, which obviously everyone is familiar with from football and basketball and baseball and softball, they're very good at too. Maybe that's something that actually moves the needle a little bit more than some smaller school like a Quinnipiac that maybe has had definitely has had a lot more success and history in college hockey. So I'm kind of interested to see how that plays out. And then obviously, Austin Lemieux coming in, even as a freshman, I just think the name recognition and it's interesting too because he grew up here, but I don't think a lot of people have seen him play.
No.
It's not like he didn't play PIHL hockey. He wasn't on any of the local junior teams. He plays USHL hockey in Omaha. So I just think it'll be interesting because I don't think a lot of people have seen him. And, he's obviously not the same kind of player that his dad was, but he's still a good player. And I do think that a lot of people, there'll be a curiosity factor there, I think, for a lot of people. And just going to see Mario's son play and what he's like and that kind of thing. And I'm sure, Mario's going to be there too, I would assume, and that should be a fun day for him as well. To have Austin there and in the building where he does most of his work, and it should just be a cool experience, I think, for the Lemieux family and for the fans to kind of be a part of it.
During these playoffs, I've seen Austin Lemieux quite a bit. He's been around the team. And you'll see him on TV too if they show a reaction shot of the Penguins box. He's the guy fist pumping the hardest after Penguins goals. So yeah, it's cool to see the little kid who was staring up at the rafters in awe. I remember when they lowered his dad's number in 2001, that bowl cut, the little blonde kid. And now he's a large man. He's a tall, lanky guy, and not quite as tall as his dad, maybe 1 or 2 inches shorter, but definitely a long reach, long wingspan. And I mentioned he was in Tier 3 junior hockey this past year out in Massachusetts. Scored a lot of goals, put up a lot of points. Struggled in the USHL, which is the highest level of junior hockey in this country. And, of course, not a pro prospect, but he'll get a chance to extend his playing career out. And I really do hope he does take the ice. That would be a terrific boon for the tournament. I think you make a good point, too, about name recognition. I've often thought the Penguins and PPG Paints Arena and Robert Morris should try to get a team like Notre Dame in there, someone who has that traditional college name recognition. Ohio State, I think, did move the needle a few years back when they were involved, too, because they're Ohio State. Same deal with Penn State, although they will not be part of the tournament for the foreseeable future. So, yeah, it's not a certainly, Alan, as you've seen with your website, it's more of a pro hockey town, but it's a slow burn on the amateur side and getting people to understand the traditions of the sport that aren't the NHL. I'm sure you'll agree.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically kind of what I'm trying to do. Is to showcase the fact that there is great hockey being played in Pittsburgh and being played by Pittsburghers outside of the NHL. And it's come a long way in a relatively short amount of time, but it still has kind of a long way to go. And when it comes to Pittsburgh as an overall hockey market and not just a Pittsburgh Penguins market.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, as I mentioned, Alan's right there writing about the sport and the Pittsburgh connections within it and throughout it at berghockey.com. And Alan, someday I'll see you down at PNC Park again.
Maybe you're just the Penguins are going to play forever.
Yeah,
never coming back.
Oh boy, it has seemed like it at certain points in these playoffs. Although you know what, like I said in the last segment, I'm not complaining about the 2-day breaks for travel. At this point, I think we all need some recoup time, whether you're playing or you're covering these games. Thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you soon again on this show. I'm sure we'll have to get you in studio next time. But I appreciate the phoner, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Talk to you later.
Well, sounds good. Thanks, Matt.
That's Alan Saunders. I'm Matt Gajtka. Final segment coming up on Gajtka's Got Game. We'll put a wrap on this and look forward to Game 6 in Nashville. What's at stake here for the Penguins? Whether it be team-wise or individual performances, what can we look forward to as they try to close out the Cup final? We'll be back with you in just a moment.
Come on, go! It's green! Come on! Go!
God damn it, Brian. You need to calm down with the road rage.
I'm sick of these people, these assholes.
The road rage, man. You got to calm down on the road rage.
Well, I want to get to where we're going. We have a lot of great stuff coming up. We're going to Falling Water,
Bicycle Heaven,
the Mattress Factory,
Tuck Knob,
Trundle Manor. All right, which way do I go? Which way do I go? Come on, come on.
Right.
Too late now.
Right, come on.
Well, too late now. I got to keep going. I'm not going to sit here like some asshole.
Oh, come on, man.
All right, you're listening to the Culture Cruise. You can find us at riversedgepgh.com.
Your local Pittsburgh area museum podcast.
Yes, riversedgepgh.com, and come take a ride with us.
Time to put a bow on this edition of Gajtka's Got Game. Thanks again to Brian Crawford for putting up with my weird hours. 10 o'clock show today. Well, it was supposed to be 10 o'clock. I ended up getting here at 10:20. Blame my parents. They didn't instill a value in being on time for things, but I'm trying to overcome that, and I hope they're not listening right now. Brian, I want to bring you in for a moment, if you don't mind.
Yes, what's up?
Disappointed that the Penguins may not win this thing at home. I was looking forward to that because it's the one frontier. It's the final frontier for the Penguins. They've never done it here on home soil or home ice, as it were. And in fact, the Pittsburgh team hasn't won at home since 1960 when Maz hit the walk-off homer against the Yankees at Forbes Field. So would that take anything away from the championship if they win it in Nashville, Tennessee on Sunday?
I don't think it'll take anything away from it. I think I'm not surprised. I mean, I was kind of expecting them to win it away. It's just the way it is with the Penguins. Never won it at home, unfortunately. I mean, it would be cool to see them win it at home, but I think, I don't know, just the fact that we'll have 4 and Philadelphia will still just have their
Philadelphia.
Yeah.
You're still thinking about the Flyers at this time.
I just the hate, it runs through my blood. So it's always
understandable.
Always good to have another win.
What was your feeling on the coverage of the Predators fans in Nashville and just the scene down there? There were plenty of Penguins fans who thought it was over the top and that NBC and the NHL was selling it a little too hard, or maybe even at the expense of Pittsburgh, and saying, "Hey, this is a real hockey crowd down there. Or look at this." This carnival. It was fun. I give Nashville so much credit. They're clearly in love with their hockey team. You need that if you want hockey to grow, to get into these non-traditional markets. And so I think it's all a positive.
I don't know. Is NBC wrong? I mean, you could hear a pin drop at PPG Paints Arena. It's sometimes
not last night, but
yeah, but I mean at times
at certain points,
yeah.
I complained that fans were leaving early in Game 2 of the final.
Isn't that disgusting when fans leave early?
Half-empty lower bowl.
Yeah, the Stanley Cup playoffs. It blows my mind. I think NBC's right. If you don't want to have that perception of yourselves, then stay for the games. Don't worry about the kiss cam.
Dance for your dilly bar.
Yeah, exactly. Worry about
Yikes.
the things that actually matter.
Yeah.
At the game, and then you won't have that perception.
I think sometimes you need a little bit of a push if you're an established player or a person or a hockey town, as this were. And I think Nashville gave Pittsburgh a push and said, hey, you can still be really crazy enthusiastic about this, even though you have been there before. I never bought into the act like you've been there before thing. Just enjoy it, man. It's
especially as a fan. It's one thing to say that as a
A
player.
player is different, yeah.
But as a fan, I mean, you're there to enjoy the game.
Mm-hmm. And you never know. I don't want to say this is true, but this could be the Penguins' last ever trip to the Stanley Cup final.
Know.
You don't know what's going to happen. They just went 7 years between final appearances, even though they had the 2 best players in the world, or 2 of the best, maybe 2 of the top 3 over that span. And it still took them 7 years to get back. So
we were just talking about the Flyers, 1975. I was born in 1986. They've never won a cup in my lifetime.
Not even close. And they've only been to the final, I think, twice in your lifetime. And they've had some competitive teams, so enjoy this, Pittsburgh, and don't be afraid to cut loose here. Let's party. Let's enjoy this, and because God knows we have a long baseball summer ahead of us. It looks like there's not a lot to cheer about at PNC Park lately, and the Steelers don't start camp for quite some time. And anyway, I've never been one to get fired up about training camp. Yeah. The games don't start for the NFL until September, so
can we get if we're really good and pay a little extra money, can we watch them warm up too?
Oh boy, yeah, we could do that.
Yeah,
you say that, but it is enjoyable to go, but it's not going to move the needle that much for me. It's it is about the games and it's about the big moments, and we've been blessed here in Pittsburgh to have quite a few, even though they may not win it at home. They will have given us quite a few memories, and if they don't win it at home, if they win it in Game 6 in Nashville, that was quite the send-off last night.
If they win it, back-to-back Stanley Cup, wins in this era, that's unheard of. So.
Oh, sure, yeah, and then they gave their fans something to really treasure last night. It was basically a 60-minute celebration after they scored early on and made it 2 and 3-0 in the first period. So thanks, Brian. Appreciate that. We'll look forward to a River Talk later on. When is your show? When's your next show?
Monday morning, so it's going to be Monday at 10 a.m. But I will say noon. Tune into riversedgepgh.com. Right here on Facebook, we have a major station announcement that will be coming out at noon, so do not miss that.
Fancy, very fancy. We look forward to that. Don't miss it. As Brian said, he'll have that for you on our various platforms. No final number for you today. No kill the cliche. We'll get back to the schedule, back to the routine next week. But what I'll take away from this Penguins team is what I was talking about with Alan, how they have played totally differently in some ways in this playoff run. Last year was all dominant puck possession, rolling three lines. This year, they've had to lean on the top two lines with Crosby and Malkin, and boy, have they come through. And I think Crosby, by the way, with his transcendent performance last night, has locked up the Conn Smythe Trophy, barring something really unforeseen in the conclusion to this final. But 87 and 71 have come to the forefront. Not always the easiest thing to do in this sport. That's more of a basketball thing where the stars can just take over. And we've seen that in the NBA Finals so far. In hockey, it has to come organically. Your team has to support you. We saw it for so many years in Pittsburgh that they didn't have the support, whether it be because of the team style of play, the coaching, the supporting characters, the defense core, maybe goaltending at times failed them. But right now, things are clicking enough for the Penguins to be on the verge of collecting their third cup of this era, which, as I talked about a couple of weeks ago, I think that is my main takeaway moving forward now from this. If they do win, Penguins and the Blackhawks right there, 3 cups apiece in the salary cap era, in the salary cap age. So heck, maybe next year we can be so fortunate to have that ultimate Game 7, if you will, 3 cups apiece, and then a final between those two. We're still waiting for that Pittsburgh-Chicago matchup. Not to get ahead of myself, but I'm going to get ahead of myself a little bit and dream about that if the Penguins do win, because that would really set up something special if we could get it in the future. Of course, that would be 3 consecutive cups, and entering this season, we'd never had back-to-back since, well, the start of this century. So maybe I should tap the brakes a little bit. At any rate, like I said in the opener here today, I think the Penguins are playing their best hockey, and I will be surprised if it comes back to PPG Paints Arena for a Game 7. I will be surprised if I don't have a few days to think about what next week's show will be about with regards to the Penguins, because I think they're going to close it out on Sunday night in Nashville, Tennessee. So that would make it, if it does happen, Bloomington, Minnesota, Chicago, Illinois, Detroit, Michigan, San Jose, California, and then Nashville, Tennessee as the 5 places where the Penguins will have raised the cup, all on the road. I don't think it means anything. But I'd like to see them win it at home and give the fans here a chance to really celebrate it and maybe burn the city down in some form or fashion. Not literally, Mayor Peduto, I'm just joking, although you are a big Penguins fan. We'll miss out on that, but we will see a transcendent team if they can pull this off on Sunday night. Thanks for listening and watching to my show each and every week. We're going to be at 10 a.m. moving forward on Fridays. I'm excited about that. Hope you are too. This has been Matt Gajtka for Brian Crawford and Alan Saunders. We're all reminding you that when the radio fades, you know life's moving fast. Back with you in 7 days' time, right here in Millvale, Pennsylvania.